Welcome to my review of Super Contra for arcade. And this is one of the early Contra games. The first one was just Contra for arcade, and then there was Super Contra for arcade. Of course, most people are familiar with the series through the NES game. That was the first game for a lot of players in the series. And both NES games, Contra and Super C, are quite a bit better than both of the arcade games. Now, this game, it's quite good, but there is some sluggishness with the controls. When you switch firing directions, you have a little bit of a delay. Your gun kind of sways, and it gives you about, a split-second delay in being able to switch directions when firing. So it gets rid of a little bit of the precision you have in the NES ones, which are pretty much instant aiming when you switch directions. Your character is also a little larger, clunkier. The jump, it's kind of short. And the hitbox is big on the character, so, combine that with the more narrow screen, and it is easier to get hit in this version. So I would say the NES ones play tighter, and they have more stages as well. So those are definitely the superior games. But these games, this game in particular that I'm reviewing now, it does play quite a bit different than the NES one. So if you enjoy the NES one, this is another version of that plays quite a bit differently. The visuals are very different. The pixel art looks pretty good, except that you'll notice that it's very washed out, and the blacks look kind of grayish because of it's kind of washed out. It almost looks like your brightness is turned up too high, but that's just the visual style of the game. But other than that, it looks pretty good. I prefer the cleaner look of the NES games, even though the graphics are, less advanced. But, that doesn't always make a game look better. The explosions are great, though. So you have a few different types of weapons, like the NES games. You get your weapons through power-ups that you pick up. So one of the biggest things to avoid a lot of times is picking up the wrong weapon power-ups in this game. I'm also going to post a link to... I'll post links to a casual speedrun I did of this game, as well as a tutorial I made for the game that shows beating the entire game with only one death, but it wasn't done as a straight-through run. It was done in segments, in stage segments with save states. And I'll also post another link to my legit full run, where I think I used 2 continues in that run. So I'll link all that in the description of the review. But yeah, overall, the game plays really, really well on the normal difficulty setting, but... there are some differences that I'm going to get into. I'm going to show some footage from the very difficult mode, which is the hardest dip switch setting, which, most arcades where you play this game probably aren't going to have the game cranked up to the fucking hardest mode. So, I'm really, the main part of the review is on the normal difficulty setting that you're seeing here. You can set the lives up to 7 as well on the dip switch, but it defaults at 3, and it defaults at 5 continues. And that's also the max you can set is 5 continues. And you do restart right where you died, but once you waste those 5 continues, that's it. It's game over. So there are limited continues. A lot of the bosses, you can pull a lot of bullshit and kill them very fast if you know what you're doing. I found some speedrun techniques, basically being able to kill the last boss instantly, which I'm going to show here at the end of this video. I did something a little different with this game. Since this game is only about 9 minutes long, the way I played it anyway. When I saw other playthroughs of the game, it was about 14 or 15 minutes long, but I play very aggressively. So for me, it's about a 9-minute game. And for the speed run, actually, I think it was about a 7-minute game when I did the speed run. So, it can be very short. And you can really run through the bosses if you know what you're doing. You can pull a lot of bullshit by even taking damage and just gunning the bosses down at point blank. So it is a short game, but I found it to be a lot of fun, and I found the shortness of the game was part of the addictiveness of it, because I can, complete maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 runs of the game, in an hour. So, I mean, if I was playing the game heavily, I'd be able to keep making attempts and making runs at the game. And that, that makes it addictive because you don't have a game that's an hour long that you have to memorize. It's only, anywhere from 9 to 14 minutes depending at how you play the game. So it's a short game, but it's action, nonstop from beginning to end. So it's a lot of fun. But you can see here I'm already at the semi-final stage. So you can see it didn't take long to get that far into the game. But you have a nice variety of enemies. You have the aliens that come in a little bit later on. There's nice boss fights. You got helicopters, aliens. The boss on this stage, the main boss, there's a mini boss, but the main boss, it looks like it's straight out of Aliens. It's like the main alien from the movie Aliens, pretty much. And these enemies pretty much are too, but the boss really represents that. It really looks like that. But it's a cool boss. Unfortunately, the fight can be over in a few seconds with the method I use, where I just stand in a certain area and fire straight up, basically. So, all the bosses can be completely trivialized for the most part. There's really no battle to speak of if you do it right. You can really end the fights almost immediately. But I kind of think that's cool. I like games like this where you can pull bullshit, and if you play well, you can kind of speed through the game. So I think that's an addictive quality to it. I think it's cool. But I still think the NES ones have a lot more substance and and replayability overall. This one, it ends up being quite a bit easier than the NES ones on default difficulty, just because this version is so short, and you can have a lot of continues and lives depending how you set it and the dip switches. You have overhead stages as well, as you can see. This is the second overhead stage and the final stage of the game. And of course, it can be a little tricky initially. I mean, it's not an easy game, but I beat the entire game in about 32 minutes my first time playing. Or my first time working on it, I should say. I think I tried it before in the past, very briefly, but it was a quick one for me to bang out. It didn't take me long to beat. But then I enjoyed it so much that I wanted to keep replaying it, so I did a little casual speed run. I went through the very difficult mode with the live setup to 7. And I'm going to complain about the very difficult mode after I show the footage of this normal mode being completed. Then I will complain about that, because there are some technical issues that really start to flare up on that difficulty. There is a little bit of slowdown and shit like that in the normal mode as well, but it's not like crippling, But on very hard mode, you're going to see, I'm going to show examples of how bullets don't even come out of your gun at times, and it'll just get you killed because they fill the screen with so many enemies. So here's the final boss. You can pull some bullshit, as you saw me do here, got in close to that wall and took it out. And now here I sacrifice a life. I commit suicide just so I can go straight up to the final boss and kill it instantly. Usually you have to destroy all different body parts of the boss. It's a long fight and it can be tough. I didn't even practice it properly because I figured this method out. I sacrifice a life and then I just go right up to it and just take it out, and that's it. So that's what I explained in my tutorial. Not much to explain now that you've seen it, but those are the kind of methods that I show and explain. And the tutorial video is the same video you just saw here, except this time I'm reviewing the game instead of explaining how to beat it. So yeah, after this I'm going to show, you're going to see what I mean with the very hard mode footage. I isolated 3 segments in the very hard mode where there's a lot of slowdown. It's mainly those 3 parts from what I could tell when I rewatched the video. But you'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. So you can see it's a short game, but here's very hard mode. Now, see when this slowdown starts kicking in, notice that bullets aren't coming out of my gun. There's these large gaps in my firing instead of a steady stream. Now, normally there is small gaps on a lot of the guns if you're using rapid fire. And there is a limit to how fast your gun will fire with the regular pellet gun. But it's usually not that bad, you know what I mean? So that slowdown really, it's very easy to get killed because of it. Like, had I been firing diagonally, I probably wouldn't have taken out that jumping guy because of bullets not coming out of my gun. I think I tried to hit him, but, there's no bullets came out. So when you have issues like that, it goes into the bad gameplay territory. I mean, the game otherwise plays pretty good, but when you combine the slower aiming where it takes about a split second for your gun to sway over and aim in the new direction that you're facing, with the slowdown, that makes it's not just regular slowdown, it's the kind of slowdown where bullets don't come out of your gun, and you can see it here how bad it is, and there's tons of guys. So to clear out all these guys, you want your guns to constantly be firing. Keep in mind, I'm holding down the fire button the entire time with rapid fire set, auto fire set on my controller. When no bullets are coming out, that's a huge problem in a game as precise as this. So I'm going to say for the very difficult mode, the game really does lose a lot. And but I would say on normal mode, it's a solid, 7 out of 10. It's a good game, and it's definitely replayable. It's a lot of fun to replay, but it is short. And like I said, if you want to play it on harder settings, it really does suffer from gameplay issues. It's the kind of artificial difficulty that's not legit difficulty. It's just bullshit, because of bad programming, basically, or limitations of the hardware. But likely the developers, just didn't give a shit, because how many arcade, owners are going to set the machine to very difficult mode for players that come into the arcade. So they probably didn't give a shit. There is another difficulty mode after normal that's just called difficult, I believe. It's not very difficult. That one may be a little bit more balanced and may not suffer from as much slowdown, but I didn't try that. I went straight to the hardest setting after normal. But that's my main issue with the game. But for just playing it on normal, it's a fun game. It's definitely replayable because it's short and it makes you want to revisit it for sure. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.